Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
Building an IoT product or a system or solution, we strongly believe that it got to start from the top. Looking into what are you trying to accomplish. If this is an end consumer product, the key thing that you want to do is you want to delight your customers, right? You want to bring them some value.
When starting down the path toward your IoT product, it's tempting to jump into the tech and get started with your POC. But don't fall into that trap. Of course, there's benefits of getting your minimally viable product out the door, but these benefits don't go away if you back up first and start with a business strategy and defined user experience. In fact, they're accelerated when you have a clear path from the start. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Erik Ljung about the importance of starting at the top when beginning your product design process.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is made possible by sales of my book, IoT Inc., published by McGraw-Hill, and the IoT Inc. Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training and certification program. Become a certified IoT professional by completing the program's 3 courses: ICIP Technology, ICIP Business, and ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation. Details of which can be found at www.iot-inc.com. That's www.iot-inc.com.
With me today on episode 16 is Erik Ljung. Erik is Chief Technology Officer at Room 5 and has over 15 years of experience in both software development and professional services. As CTO, he's responsible for the company's long-term technology and consulting vision for the Internet of Things. I saw the Room 5 guys at a recent Industrial Internet Consortium meeting, and I thought I'd reach out since I was looking for a bigger picture discussion. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So how long have you guys been members of the IIC, and were you in Reston there, or did I see someone else?
So I was personally in Reston, and
you were?
And
okay.
We actually recently joined, so we're one of the new small members. So that was my first IIC event.
Yeah, what did you think of it?
Yeah, it was very, very, very informational, and it was good to meet people in the industrial part. So far, Room 5 and myself has focused a lot on the consumer market and products in that space, and we're looking to expand into using our sort of experience and our knowledge that we gained in the industrial space.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's that many differences, or do you anticipate that many differences between, say, a consumer IoT product and, say, a commercial IoT product?
I think there is, from a technology standpoint, a lot of the building blocks and the components are probably going to be similar. Mm-hmm. I think the approach that you take is going to be slightly different, but still there's a lot of similarities that I believe one can use.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Maybe they're just a little bigger, heavier, stinkier, but the technology, like you say, is very similar. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background in IoT?
So I started programming when I was 13 years old, and through my early life, I worked on web-based sort of social media platforms and photo sharing tools, and this was way before Facebook and the internet really came to life the way it is today. So I started learning a lot about the internet and web services and all what comes with that. Then I continued, starting my own little consulting service back in Sweden, where I'm from. Mm-hmm. An interesting point in my career was about 10 years ago. I had a year at Philip Research in Eindhoven, where I did my thesis. And this was way before, IoT was even mentioned. And we actually wrote about the smart home from a healthcare perspective at the time. Remember that was 10 years ago.
Right.
The iPhone didn't exist, for instance.
Sure.
And we still talked about concept of intelligent mirrors, smart toothbrushes, seamless monitoring of elderly in the home environment, all the things that are sort of in the agenda of IoT today. So it's kind of interesting going back and reading that old document, what we came up with. That also ended up me with two colleagues building out an early proof of concept of a distributed camera system. Now, that was obviously very technology focused, the project at the time. But it's interesting to see how, what's now IoT today was in research 10 years ago.
Yeah, no. And so when did you start in IoT then? Or what they call IoT? When did you start calling what you're doing IoT, I guess is maybe another way to say it.
That's a good question. I don't think, to be honest, I didn't start calling it IoT. Other people named it IoT.
We're telling you what you were doing.
Yes, actually, I believe, that's what we've been doing for the last 10, 20 years. I mean, I think it's just a new era of technology, and there's a terminology for it now. And basically just the technology is being advanced so rapidly that now it's more of an enabler for IoT than IoT is the new technology. That's kind of what I see.
What do you mean? What is an enabler for IoT?
So, I mean, just to go back on that 10 years ago, I think, we were talking, there was technology that could build, a distributed camera system for monitoring elderly. But obviously it was in research state. It was, not commercializable. It couldn't be commoditized, being built into products. But now, prices are dropping on the chipsets, on the connectivity platforms. There's so many different components out there off the shelf, open source or products that you can license.
Right.
So you can actually build these systems and, make a business case out of it, today. And I think that's what really formed the IoT hype, in my opinion.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, and this shows my age a little bit, but my first job after, I guess I was a mathematician first, but then as a professional programmer, we used to develop everything ourselves. And recently, I've been talking to people, in the development world, specifically because of IoT. And I don't know if it's your experience, but they're telling me these days, developers coming out of school, for example, and again, I'm showing my age, but it sounds like you reminded me of what you just said, but it sounds like you just grab libraries from here, you grab SDKs from here, and you're really, really able to build upon the shoulders of many people that came before you. And it seems like just what you can get done today is so much more than, I guess, when I was a programmer. Am I on the mark there? I mean, it just seems like it's different these days.
No, I absolutely agree. And, do the analogy with just smartphone world, right? I mean, imagine if you would sit down as your single programmer in a garage and try to build a smartphone. Right. But compared to what you can do with, the iOS SDK or the Android SDK, you can build amazing applications, right? Just on your own, basically. Yeah. But there's a couple of million man years that been put into, working on all the platforms, the hardware, the SDKs and the APIs and the cloud services and so on that you're actually using, right? To build your specific application.
Yeah. No, I really miss that.
Yeah. And that goes a little bit to my background. Personally, I've started coding very young. I've been sort of through the full stack of software development, all the way from low-level driver stuff to cloud-based web, very front-end mobile graphics. Also through my career done, everything from software development to architecture, project management, engineering management, consulting management, and recently, about a half a year ago, I took over as CTO here at Room 5, looking more at the long-term vision of things. So it's kind of my background in a short, concise format.
Well, that's kind of what most people know about you. What's an interesting fact that maybe most people don't know about you?
So, skiing and snowboarding has always been a big part of my life. I started that at a very young age.
Well, wait a second. Didn't you say you were Swedish? Is that supposed to be something that's unusual or something?
Probably not. But
okay, sorry. Go ahead. Skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah. So that was a big part.
That's a big part of it.
Big part of my life, at least until I get kids, and we'll see. Yeah. Now, when they're growing up, we'll get them on skis as well. But one thing that, most people don't know is that in my early 20s, I spent one season as a ski bum in Austria. That's how passionate I was about skiing.
Cool.
And unfortunately, I think I was the only person at the time that season that used heli-skiing in the reverse way, meaning that I used the helicopter to go down from the mountain instead of up to it.
Now, it's interesting. Your children probably aren't as old as mine, but I'm starting to impart, this type of, I guess maybe post-high school type of advice. But would you recommend to your kids when they're that age to take a year off of school or a year off of life and do something like being a ski bum?
I'll keep that confidential for now.
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
All right. Well, let's get into IoT. So we've had a lot of down and dirty discussions, technology, putting on the gum boots and wading through the bits in technology. And I love that. And I think it's important, I think it's important for business managers to understand the technology, not enough to be able to implement it, but enough to make business decisions with it. But I've had a number of our listeners ask, hey, you got to pop up for air here and give us a bigger picture. So why don't you, you've gone through Room 5 a little bit as a professional services firm. What are the building blocks that you see or that need to be considered when you're creating an IoT product?
So I'd like to back up one step, when you mentioned the big picture, because this is kind of a core of what we're trying to do and accomplish, is that, building an IoT product or a system or solution, we strongly believe that it got to start from the top. Looking into what are you trying to accomplish, and
right.
If this is an end consumer product, the key thing that you want to do is you want to delight your customers, right? You want to bring them some value, and one example of that is that I go back to my my thesis 10 years ago where I wrote about smart toothbrushes, right? You can Bluetooth enable a toothbrush today without too big of a bill of material add-on.
Sure.
And you can see that, your battery is low and you get a notification on your smartphone that you should probably change the battery in the toothbrush. This is, obviously a little bit foolish example, but I'm trying to make a point. But what we wrote, 10 years ago when we didn't even think about, Bluetooth enabling the toothbrush, we were just thinking the concept of a smart toothbrush, right? What about it monitors your mouth health?
Sure.
It gives you advice about, what you're doing right or wrong. That can actually lead to maybe not less dentist appointment, but at least cheaper ones, right? Now you have a real value add. You have a use case that, potentially is compelling to the end user. If you start from there, then you can start, building your team and looking, what do I need to accomplish this use case, right? Then you can go into the more technology to say, what do I need? Do I need a Wi-Fi enabled toothbrush? Do I need a Bluetooth? What's enough to solve my use case, right? And then I think, at least we believe it's very important, just like a startup works, be very lean and agile in the way you're doing this and do iterations, together with, a design and a UX team that can constantly, not just like you do, iterations in software development, you have to iterate on the user experience, since the RD is really compelling, do user testing and so on. And I think that's very common in the product design world. But I think that's where sort of, core technology engineering of IoT with connectivity, Bluetooth, chips, power management meets this design world, and if you look at the iPhone, for instance, this is what Apple does very well, but Apple is also a tremendously huge organization with enormous muscles, right? If you're a little player or you're an existing big product company that have, some product like toothbrushes, which normally is, a mechanical thing with a battery, right? Now it's connected to some extent. There's this bridge to gap, and that's where we're trying to position ourselves. That's really important to be successful at the end of the day.
No, from your experience with your clients, are they approaching you with starting from the top, or are they kind of getting a little bit ahead of themselves?
It's actually a very, I think it's a very cultural thing, depending on, you know, what the culture is at the client side. Some are coming in, basically, we have this product, let's connect it because everybody else is doing it. And there's a lot of evangelizing that needs to be done there. Some people are coming, like we see the Kickstarter, the smaller companies that are coming with that approach already, and they might just need more sort of meat to the bone on actually how to build it out, which platforms or which SDKs or which open source tools should I be using to actually realize my vision here. So I think there's a breadth there, and that's one of the benefits we have working with various clients, not being a product company. We can see and learn from all of these. At the end of the day, we want to grow our knowledge base in this space as a consulting company.
Sure. All right. Well, let's get to the building blocks. And what are you seeing? And maybe just take us through the different building blocks that are required.
So I try to evangelize around, I think Cisco did an amazing job putting out their reference model for the IoT, the 7-layered stack, where you basically have the edge at the bottom, and at the top you have the application and the analytics. And, from the edge, you go to the connectivity layer, and then there's the separation between OT and IT, so operational technology and information technology, where basically, the edge can, take the toothbrush as an example again, right? There might, be certain...
Yeah, use the toothbrush example and maybe just, take us through the 7 layers then. If you
I would say, if assuming we Bluetooth connect that, the operation thing will be, I need to change my batteries, right? Or I get immediate feedback on how I performing my brushing, right? But from there on, the phone, can work as a gateway to, provide analytics. It could go to insurance companies, whatever, right? That's where the IT breaks off. And obviously, if you're, a manufacturer of toothbrush, you can get information of how your toothbrushes are performing for, predictive analytics and of, what you need to do better in your next product. You can, there it goes into the big data part of IoT.
But dig down. Let's dig down. Okay, so now we're in the toothbrush, and you've mentioned the connectivity of the Bluetooth. So now the Bluetooth is going to be it's going to have a small OT network within the toothbrush. It's going to have different sensors. You were talking about potentially checking on the the mouth's health. There's going to maybe be timers. So talk a little bit about that, and let's work our way through so what's on the OT part of the toothbrush?
So, obviously you have, a couple of sensors that is, providing you with some data. The next step is obviously, a toothbrush is very simple. It's not sort of a sub-network in that sense, but you probably need to pick some kind of processing element that,
there's an embedded system.
There's an embedded system.
It's going to be a small one.
Yeah,
but...
and obviously it's battery driven, so power consumption is one thing that you need to address.
Yes.
I'm not sure if, your toothbrush has a tremendous, amount of security requirements. It's more probably the privacy thing. But as you're using the phone to your gateway, you could probably, look at designing that from that level and up. From the embedded system, what we call the edge, that it's talking to your sensors, there's obviously some firmware logic that handles, the local embedded system. And there is the Bluetooth connectivity that, gets to your phone or maybe your home gateway or hub that talks to all your local things in the home, your light bulbs, your door lock, your irrigation system, whatever it is, right?
Now, how Erik, how would you approach the embedded system? I mean, would you be looking, you're working with a client on this smart toothbrush, and are you involved in helping them find a chipset, or are you actually going to be pulling together chips from different spots? I mean, we've already talked about connectivity. We've talked about some computing. So maybe get into that a little bit more. What would you do to build that embedded system?
That's a good question. And, we are a design and a software company, but we are all the way down in the software stack to the firmware layer, which means that, hardware and software needs to work closely together. Right. we also have partners in the semiconductor space, which means that we can make sort of recommendations and based on our previous experience. But also, there's other parts of that coming in terms of businesses. That could be existing relationships in terms of where can you get the best deal. But we definitely want to be part of, understanding what that hardware system looks like, because at the end of the day, where we started, you are trying to realize some compelling use cases that delights your end customers, and if you make some wrong choices there, that can be painful down the road. And there's this saying that it can be fixed in software later, and obviously it can, right? But there's a gray zone there.
Yeah, what cost though? Yeah. Well, so are you saying then? So I'm just taking it from the point of view of our listeners, and they are a company, and they would be a company that potentially hire a design firm or a consulting firm like yours. Now, are they the ones that are going to be making the decisions? Are you just advising them, or are you coming to them with a solution, or maybe a couple different options, and saying, hey, you can go with this chipset, from this vendor, it has these pros and cons, you can go this way, or what's that? Maybe just tell us a little bit more about that process.
The typical way we propose to work with a client like that is what we call co-creation. And that's based out on, the complexity of IoT systems, even for a toothbrush, right? You're picking sensors, you're picking a processor or an SoC that has some connectivity. You're looking at, building software for potentially a smartphone. You're potentially also looking at, later up in the stack, a cloud piece, and a management portal, an analytics piece. It's very complex, right? To put all these pieces together.
Even for that toothbrush.
Yeah. So what we want to do is what we call co-creation. We understand that, nobody can have all these expertise under one roof. We come in with our expertise, but we also want to work very closely shoulder to shoulder with our clients to co-create this instead of just, this is our part, we'll build that, deliver that, right? So we want to be part from day one, provide what we know and what we can do together with, with the client might have an...
So you're collaborating then with them.
It's very important, I believe, in the IoT space. And, even, again, referencing Cisco, the chairman there talked about, this is a new era where collaboration is going to be a must at all levels, no matter if you're a small company or you're a big, huge company like Cisco, right? It's going to be hard to be the one that has all these elements and all these skill sets to build IoT solutions.
No one company can do it all. But okay, so now we've got our embedded system. We've collaborated with our client, us listening. We're collaborating with our design firm. We now have chosen the embedded system. So then, are you doing some software development on that embedded system? I'm going to work my way up the stack that we were just talking about. But are you now taking the SDK from this and working on it, or what, or do you sort of move on from there first?
I think this is, where IoT is what's the word I'm looking for? It's incredibly rapidly fast developing as sort of an overall technology. I mean, if you make a couple of architectural design decision, 3 months later there might be another chipset that actually supports some of that. So,
right. So what do you do then?
So you have to basically draw a line in the sand, right? Because you can't continue to iterate over and over. Then you'll never get a product out, right?
Good point.
But you have to be smart about what you pick, because there's a huge richness of different components and platforms and SDKs. But if we go back to the toothbrush, if you look at today, a snapshot of, we talk today, a lot of the semiconductor company, like the Broadcoms, the TIs that might have an embedded chip, including Bluetooth, it comes with an SDK. It also comes with some kind of RTOS or tools that can simplify that development. There's no need to start from scratch, right? So I see a trend for us going into more building, being a system integrator. The pure software development is the glue layers and the integration points. And at the end, at the top, the actual sort of customized application for that use case, or that compelling, delighting user experience that you want to get to, right? Okay.
So yeah, that makes sense. And then you're kind of, to a certain extent, going to be working with the software development environment of the chipset that you choose. All right, so we've got the OT figured out. We've got the connectivity figured out. And you were saying Bluetooth, so then we are going to our mobile phone. So now, is there an app that you're developing for this, or is it just going to be something that's going to be on the OS? Where are we going from there? And then from the mobile phone, we're going to move our way up to the cloud. So what about on the mobile? What about on that connection between the Bluetooth and the phone? What's happening there?
The reference model that we've seen mostly and still using in some of the ongoing engagement we have is where you land there is in sort of user space or in the app space on the phone. Because if you believe that, obviously functionality will grow on the mobile platforms.
Sure.
But the mobile platforms are still managed by the OEMs, right? It's Apple that decides what's in or out of the platform. You don't customize an Apple platform. Obviously, Android is open source. You could customize that if you want, but, you're not going to reach the big end consumer space if they need to root their device and flash with your software, right? It has to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Easy.
Makes sense.
So,
yeah. So you're in the app space, then you're saying.
And the app APIs specifically for Bluetooth today, it's doable, right? You can build, your local app that handles your OT or your local functionality and other.
Yep.
But you can also use the phone as the gateway. This is a typical reference model that many products use, right? You have the embedded side, a Bluetooth connectivity to a smartphone. The smartphone works both as a sort of a local control app or hub
sort of,
but it also works as a gateway to get to the bigger picture, the internet and the cloud and the big data, right?
So now is this app going to then do two things? One, it's going to provide that gateway connectivity, and then secondly, it's going to have, you didn't brush your teeth often enough, or I'm going to send your mom a text message. Is it combined, or are these two different apps, or is it one app when we're in this app space right now?
No, I would probably say it's the same app, right? You don't want. I mean, even further, right? You see the trend in sort of the smart home. If you look specifically at the smart home, is you definitely don't want one app for your toothbrush and one app for your light bulb and one app for your microwave, or you want one experience, right? And you see, there's a lot of research and work being put into that, like the All Seen Alliance is addressing this. The Thread group with Nest are addressing the same thing. The sort of the interoperability of the smart home specifically, which it's obviously technologies that can be applied outside just consumer goods in the smart home. And so that's stuff that I'm looking into on day-to-day basis, following and seeing where the trend is moving there.
Okay, so. Then are you then saying you would recommend not developing a specific toothbrush app, but then folding it into like a health, maybe if you're on an iPhone health kit, if it's there yet, I don't even know. And if you're on Android, something else, or what are you suggesting there then?
It's a good question, and I think that's a case by case basis. I mean, at the end of the day,
well, for this case, the toothbrush case, I mean,
I don't know, to be honest. It had to, be...
You started it. We're going to take this toothbrush all the way to the cloud, baby. Okay, yeah. I mean, so you're saying if possible, you want to tie it into something else, like maybe there's some e-health or there's some e-hygiene or something.
And I think...
if you can, right?
Yeah, and I think the point there is to, again, go back to that iterative development, right? Where, you make your minimal viable product and obviously you monitor what Apple is doing with their HomeKit and what potentially other, and want to enable you to be part of that. Just like, take any sort of mobile 2.0 type of application. They start small. I was just Ubering into the office here this morning, and I got a notification in my Uber app that I can, I can play my Spotify music in the car on my way. So that's a good example of how they, they started with one use case, but now they're integrating with more other services. That was new to me, and it was pretty cool, right? I could, listen to my Spotify music in the car on my way in. So I think that's the natural evolvement. And, as Apple and Google and the other alliances are improving there and making it more open, more interoperable for other third parties, they can make use of that, just like, your app world is developing depending on what the next release is giving you in terms of options.
Yeah, no, but I think you make a great point, and you made it earlier, is that, yeah, you want to have, yeah, maybe a minimally viable product, but you want to get something out the door. And if nothing else, you want to have an early design win, or I should say maybe a POC that you can show people. So probably in this case, you'd put together something pretty quick with all those libraries that we were talking about earlier. Just unless something was obvious, just to get it out the door and just show people, the toothbrush on the phone. Right. So now,
I want to make one more point there, though, and which is, kind of what we're trying to say is that, over the course of, building out the simple use case, you learn a lot, right?
Right.
Both from
Good point.
Both from the technology standpoint and the user experience and sort of the design part. And you started with a thesis and maybe that didn't make sense, and you have to be able to adopt and quickly sort of change sort of the purpose of what you're trying to do. And that's where we believe that the co-creation between design, technology, and working with our clients, all those three vectors are very important, that everybody is aligned. So you don't go off on tangents, right? Because then it's hard to pull it back together in the same direction.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, you want to get something done, because in doing something is going to basically show you what you have to do, and it's going to teach you a lot by what maybe it won't be the end goal, but it will definitely teach you a lot for where you want to go. All right, so we have our connectivity to our phone. Now our phone has to connect to something. Are you rolling your own cloud service? Are you choosing a specific cloud service, an IoT cloud service? Tell me what happens from the phone up now. Now we're kind of getting liftoff from the phone.
From an architectural and technology standpoint, obviously you want to pick off the shelf stuff too. That will improve time to market and will decrease costs, right? And de-risk things. That's pretty obvious for most people. One thing that I've experienced over the last year or so, looking into this a lot, is one thing that's very complex for consumer good products comes from a traditional of, being sold at shelf, in a retail store. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a 90-day warranty, and then that product is out, right? But now the new thing with smart connected product is that they have a lifespan connected to the manufacturer for much longer, because you have to keep the cloud services up and to get things running. Right. And if you look at most of the platforms and components that, give you some hosting or some functionality in the cloud that you can do, your use cases based on, most of those work in a business model that has a recurring revenue stream, right? And if you can't build that into your toothbrush, there's a challenge there that you have to address early on, and realizing that it's not a pure bill of materials. This is something that we talk to our partners about, and the different cloud vendors, that you got to find a way there. Think also about you're using maybe 2 or 3 different cloud services to realize your use cases. Now you have 3 recurring revenue streams that needs to be fed, right? That's a challenge.
Well, so what do you do then?
It's a good question, and obviously, again, that has to be worked out with the client. What makes sense, and can they move their product into more the GE model, right? Where maybe toothbrush is not the best example for that, but is there a way that you can sell services around your toothbrush? Maybe it's.
Well, toothbrush is a service.
Yeah, maybe the toothbrush itself is not what you buy. You buy, a service with your dentist that, because you're using this specific toothbrush, they can monitor your data, and that goes away to your dental insurance or something around that line. That's how I think, decision makers needs to start thinking and take that, really understand the different business model behind the scenes there.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, Erik. And I would argue that you're going to want to do this up front. You're going to want to do this up front with your IoT business plan and your requirements document. But I think the point that you made on here that I think is important is that you've got because you have all these different components in the IoT product, you need to look at the business model of each one of those components. And then you need to think about what is your business model in advance of even making these decisions. But what's going to be your business model that's going to be able to satisfy the business models of all these different components. Or maybe you're going to have to change, who you choose components. And I don't mean electronic components. I mean, I guess just sections or parts of the IoT solution for the product. But I think it's a very important one is that your business model is going to, whatever you choose, maybe this is going to force you to do something a little bit different. And maybe we originally were thinking, oh, I'm going to build a connected toothbrush. But I think we've sort of gotten to the point where maybe it's a better idea is we're going to go to, I don't know, the American Dental Association, or we're going to go to the local dental group, and we're going to say, we want to sell, would you like to sell clean teeth services that includes a toothbrush to your customers? And that's a great example, even using this what we think is maybe a silly example, but I think it's very illustrative of an example of the toothbrush where the business models really has to be thought up front. The business really has to be thought up front. And so it's not just you're designing an IoT product, but you're designing an IoT business model. Any more thoughts on that concept? Because I want to continue here.
No, I agree with you, and just thinking about from a personal point of view, if just like I pay my dental insurance, on a monthly basis, imagine if toothbrushes and toothpaste and everything was just built into that. I know that I pay X amount of dollars a month, and that includes I got a good health in my mouth, and I got the toothbrushes to support it, the smart toothbrushes. I got the toothpaste, I got the dental visits. It's all one big package, right? Then I can opt in or opt out. That's where I think the discussion needs to start. And now we're talking to what we started this conversation, at the top. How does this, actually add value to me as an end consumer, right?
Right. No, that's 100% correct.
Another good example from the smart home is, think about, you see these new smart irrigation controllers coming out from garage companies that, you can...
garage companies, okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and you can, some of them have grown bigger, but you can control...
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Not literally a garage opener company, but smaller. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
A startup, let's put it.
Yeah.
You can control your irrigation system from the smartphone. Now, obviously, that could be, good use case, right? But how often do you actually interact with it? What I would like to see is that, I pay this amount of dollars a month in services, and my lawn is kept green. That's it. That's it. That's what I, all the IoT technology components that we talk to, the device, the OT, the IT, that's just enablers. That's our job to figure out how we solve that use case, right?
Right. And that's a result-based business model. And I think, that is, what I believe is there's a continuum, there's an IoT business model continuum. And if you follow it from where we are to where it will be in the future, we're going to get closer and closer to the business model of our customer. Our business model will match their business model. In this case, the business model is the result of what the value is I want to have a green lawn. So then you build your business model around, I just want to have a green lawn, and you figure out all the rest of it. And that's what they're paying for. I agree.
Uber is another great example of that. You want to get from point A to B very frictionless.
Yeah. And I don't have to worry about the damn tip, like I'm Canadian. I'm going, geez, am I doing 20? Am I doing 25%? I like the concept that the tip's just built in.
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about any of that.
No, you don't even have to bring up, a credit card or cash.
No,
right?
it's just like, see you, thank you. And it's very pleasant, very pleasant, yeah. So listen, I love this stuff, but I'm going to dig us back down into the tech because that's where we are in the podcast right now. So you were saying there would be a number of different cloud services you could choose from. Okay, let's use the example of the toothbrush. What would be some examples? I mean, you can use names, that's totally fine, or you could use examples of maybe there's a cloud service with this chipset, or, so what would be the different options of cloud services that we would have to choose, knowing that we have this issue of the business model and having to figure that out? But so what are the options here as we move our way up the stack?
Again, there's a rich set of options, but one thing to consider also as well is, a lot of the cloud services that are now actually growing out from being just cloud services because they're growing into the IoT space. So many of them are, providing you a much richer package, which means they are, collaborating with the chipset already. The communication channel might be already there. The security is already built in. There is, the upgrade over the air of the firmware could also be built in. So, we started from the bottom and built our design here for the toothbrush. I think you have to look at the big picture from the start, right?
And that's what you said, though. But I agree. Yeah,
because there are cloud platforms like I'll throw one out there. Electric Imp, right? That has an embedded system with a Wi-Fi connectivity, with a cloud platform that does device management. It can help you do your software upgrades. It's guaranteeing secure connectivity. Then you get a lot of those pieces already in place, right? By just picking the right cloud platform.
Right.
Or you go with, a Broadcom chip, for instance, where you get, the hardware, the basic software stack, the Bluetooth connectivity, and now you can build, the other side on the app. It really, there's a lot of choices there, and I guess expertise and previous mistakes will be the best guidance in that. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's obviously why they would, look for a partner like Room 5. So I think one of the good points that you make here of many is the cloud services. There's many choices, but when picking the cloud services, look at the functionality, and specifically you want an IoT cloud service. You're not just looking for a cloud service, and what that implies are going to be the protocols, that you're going to be sending from this. We're using the toothbrush still. We're back on that. So what are the protocols? What are the application protocols we're going to be sending? We know what the media layer is. We're hopefully doing it IP at the network layer, and then the application protocols. Is it going to support the cloud? Going to support the application protocol? We're going to use our toothbrush. Security. I want to ask you about that in a second. And over the air updates. Okay, so this one, I'm scratching my head a little bit about. How does the cloud play into doing OTA upgrades? You were mentioning that could be one of the features of an IoT cloud service.
So, that can be done in various ways, right? If you have a toothbrush, perhaps one way of doing it could be, sort of just a health check or a call home feature. That's traditionally done, right? The toothbrush calls home, reports status, let's say once a day, and when it talks to the servers at the cloud, they'll let the toothbrush know that there's a new firmware update available. Okay,
so it'd be built into the cloud service. Then I like that.
It could also be the other way around, where if you have some more persistent connectivity, if you assume that the edge device is not battery driven, it could be pushed out, right? And maybe that's not the perfect use case for an end consumer product, because I believe as a consumer, you want to know what's going on. You want to be able to opt in or opt out of a software upgrade, just like you do with your smartphone. But if it's in sort of an installed system, you might not want to go and click OK on each of your light bulb because there's a software update. Who knows, right? I'm just saying there are differences on how that can be done. There's also a trend that you see that, there's bare metal firmware running on the chipset. But in the case of, I'll use Electric Imp again, they're running sort of a virtual part that is programmable in a high level language.
Makes it a little bit easier.
It becomes more of a sort of a traditional user space, just like you can update your application on a smartphone. You're now updating your application that runs in a container environment. So there's many choices there, and you have to think hard about what applies to your case.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. I mean, and I almost think there should be no option to turn off security patches, but that's just a personal opinion. But now we've got the data coming off of the toothbrush. We know when it's being used. We know for how long it's being used. We're getting the data from the sensors. We're taking it through our Bluetooth up to the cloud provider the IoT cloud provider that we chose. Presumably they're going to have storage for us, but now let's get into the next layer. I think that might be layer 7. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm just remembering the 7-layer cake there. So now we're in layer 7 and we want to analyze it. So what are your recommendations to me as a company that's building this connected toothbrush, or I would say IoT toothbrush? what are our options here now on the analytics side?
I think the key there is to start to look at, what data you have, right? Because the data itself won't give you anything unless you ask it the right questions, right?
Good point. Yeah.
So it comes to data model. And take the toothbrush for an example. The raw sensor data might not be as interesting for you as a user. You need some kind of aggregated view of it. But it might be very interesting for the sensor manufacturers to monitor how their sensors are doing, right? And that could be something, I spoke to a person actually at the IIC that are doing research on specifically data as an asset for these companies. And I think that's a key thing as we were talking about, how do you think about your business model? You could actually find things that your product or your system is producing, that it's where the data it's producing is an asset that you could resell
to someone else.
And Apple is a good example how they know adding their, their opt-in health kit or whatever it's called, where your app can provide data for them to do research on, right? That's another. So let's go back. The sensors could be one, right? That could go resell to sensor manufacturers. This is how sensors perform
under these oral conditions. Yes.
Some part of that data could be used for insurance companies to show that you're really taking care of yourself or whatever that is. Some data could be just giving a snapshot to the dentist. This is the recent week. This is probably what you should focus on the next visit. Some can be directly to you, right, as a consumer.
Giving you bulletins maybe or something, or giving you advice or suggestions.
So the point is that I think, the data itself is, a huge, data lake, right? The question is, what do you do with it?
How do you massage it? And you brought up the data model, so I'd like you to, maybe not right now, but I do want you to get back to the data model in a minute.
And again, there are, for extremely huge data sets, you have the entire Hadoop cluster and all what comes with that. There are other, alternatives like the Splunks of the world that, do real-time data analytics and sort of correlation of things. Another thing, I think the key thing is to sort of layer that and look at the aggregated data models, because assume that you're a toothbrush manufacturers, and now what we came to a service provider of tooth health, right?
That's right. Oral health.
Yeah, oral health. Right. You might have, 2 million devices out there. Yes. Now it's starting to get very interested to look at correlation of how things are used. This can be, is there a difference between, oral health in San Diego versus San Francisco, right? I mean, there's so much you can do with this, and it's...
I agree. So now let's talk about the tools. So you've mentioned a couple of them. You got the Hadoop as a certain type of database that's good for, let's say, post-processing big amounts of this aggregate data you're talking about. You're talking about Splunk, which might be something for real-time analysis. So how are you making the choice for your analytic tools? Because that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think there's, it's like you got to find the right tool for the job, right? And it got to go again from a top-down approach. What are the questions you're asking? And then look what tools can provide you the best answer, or the actual, again, the time to market, reduce the cost, reduce the risk of getting it done, right? So I think the key is to, actually be pretty broad in your thinking and look and get a deeper understanding of where. Excuse me. I got an interruption here. To get an understanding, what can these platforms do for me? And also, more important, how can I integrate them with the rest of the system that are architected, right? And
that's right.
Because that can be pain as well. I mean, we've all seen huge enterprise clusters with, 7 different systems, databases, ERP systems, CRMs that are, there is a model that lets, if we all got these systems to talk, we would have the perfect view of the health of our big corporation. But there's a cluster F underneath. Excuse my language, right?
Yeah. And, in this case, what we care about is fresh breath and white teeth. So we're going to need, the cluster for that. But again, I think the point, we're going back to the very first point, is the planning starting from the top. And, I always say, think big, but start small. And the thinking big part is a starting point, is when you're thinking about the business, when you're considering all the different aspects, even before you hire a guy like you. You guys, the listeners of this show, should be going through both what's the business plan for this IoT toothbrush, and maybe service, oral health service. What are my requirements, to basically fit within my organization? But so what you're saying then on the analytics is there's going to be different types of analytics, and you want to choose the right tool, for the job. And do all analytics kind of work with all the different IoT cloud services, or are we limited there?
I think all of them are trying to get very, very standardized or open APIs, because that's an enabler for them to be integrated in various solutions. So maybe not all of them are fully integrated with everything today, but they're definitely working on it. I would believe that that's what they all have in their roadmaps, right? Again, take our friends over at Splunk, for an example. They are working on, adapters and ways to be able to just, leverage what the power of their platform is for anything in the IoT
Any
space.
database.
But that's, obviously, we know how many protocols there are, how many different systems. So
we do.
There's a lot of work to be done there.
Especially listeners to this podcast, because we went into a lot of details.
One point I want to make, though, as well, for your audience of potentially decision makers and are looking at. We talked about how you have to have a business model that supports this IoT. I think also not only working with a company like ours, who's a service firm, but also working with these platforms. One key thing that is very important to keep in mind is how do you build a contract vehicle to support this kind of co-creation and collaboration between all these different components and building out that system. At the end of the day, you're a decision maker. You have some budget, you have some thoughts of what you want to do. Obviously, it would be nice to do some kind of fixed price schedule of that. But we also, during this whole conversation, we realized how many choices and how much you will learn during the journey of building this out. So I think it would be very hard for, specifically for like a company like us early in the process to propose sort of this is what we'll do for this amount, right? And on the other hand, if you're on the other side of the table, you don't want to go full sort of time and materials and said, let's just keep burning and see where we land, right? You want to have some guarantees. And I think that's a challenge in this space, and it's a challenge for us. Absolutely. That's something that...
So when you say contract vehicle, you mean the contract with a partner like yours? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, even that, or a hosted cloud service or an analytics engine or so on and so on.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Well, no, and that's true. And it goes back to the point that we were talking about earlier, is that you have all these different business models that you're going to need to satisfy costs in different ways, and you need to wrap yours around it. But I know what you're saying, but I do believe, again, a lot of upfront thinking is going to simplify. You're not going to know everything until you dig into it, like you said, Erik, but I think, thinking through the business models, thinking through the use cases, thinking through basically how the customer is going to be using it, I think you can get pretty far along if you spend that initial time and then, building a business around this concept, and then, what are the requirements for the product to basically be able to fulfill the business. There still seems to me that is from a return on investment point of view, the time put in this upfront work is going to, you're still going to have to deal with the different contract vehicles that you said, but it's going to be, it's going to be a lot easier to do so if you've given a lot of upfront thoughts to this. Don't you agree?
Yeah, no, and I think, a key thing there is to think of it as, an overall budget for what you're trying to accomplish. And then you can break it into steps, and each step can have its own budget. Each component is, just like you budget, your business, right? And that's due to the fact that it is, a complex system underneath with many moving pieces.
Yeah, no, very right. All right, well, I think that's great. We just randomly came on this toothbrush, or maybe not so random. You did, it seems like, do a thesis on it, but it did take us through the 7 layers, at least, the Cisco model. I think there's a variety of different models that you can look at from a technology point of view, but that's a great one. We went through the 7 layers, I think. Great. Well, so where can people find more out about you and your company?
So anybody is free to, go to our website, room5.com, or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or Twitter, and obviously, there's.
I'll put that in the show notes. Your contact information,
and there's contact forms, the traditional ones on our website that will get a hold of our sales team. And obviously, we have a blog at our page, and we're trying to keep the blog very focused on, more not. Actually showing examples of what we're doing, and what are tips,
real world kind of,
what are tips and tricks and in development in this space, and our company is pretty broad in terms of our engineering capacity, from the firmware and the embedded, the connectivity, security, to the cloud and even the mobile pieces, right? So we try to sort of cover many of the sort of software parts of an IoT solution. With that said, as we talked about earlier, nobody can do everything, right? So we also work with partners and certain specialists outside when, it's tweaking a camera sensor, for instance, or, doing security audits and so on. So we talked about the big ecosystem of, collaborating between platforms and service providers and your own in-house organization. We as a company work that way as well in our little world. So,
you need to. Yeah.
We have our own little ecosystem, and we obviously want to be part of the big IoT ecosystem. So,
yeah. Well, excellent. So it's ROOM, the numeral 5.com. I'll have all this in the show notes. But Erik, enjoyable. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. That was a good talk with Erik Ljung. This podcast goes vertical, deep diving into different topics each week. If you prefer a more horizontal and structured approach to learning IoT business and its orbiting technologies, check out my book IoT Inc., published by McGraw-Hill, or become a certified IoT professional by completing the ICIP training and certification program. For details, just go to www.iot-inc.com. Also go to www.iot-inc.com for an analysis of this episode, links to things that were mentioned during the episode, and very importantly, the episode's PDF transcript. Just search for the name of the episode or the guest. If you're new to this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll get every week's episode delivered straight to your device. Or, if you've been listening for a while, there are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating or a review on iTunes. Just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes. It only takes 1 click to leave a rating, a little bit longer to leave a review. You can share it on social. I'm on LinkedIn, to a lesser extent on Twitter. And of course, you can support the show by buying my book, IoT Inc., or the ICIP training and certification program. It's how I pay the bills. Next week's episode is more like an experience than a piece of hardware with Gordon Hoy of Smart Design. I hope you can join me then. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Till next week, may your path to IoT business be a top-down one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.